Aesthetic, episode 39. Joining me today is Adam Knoche. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Jordan. Happy to be here.
Great. We're here to talk about your work, and we're here to talk about clay as a medium in general. So why don't we kind of start there? Sure. Tell me, everyone has kind of an idea of what ceramics are, but give us kind of like an overview like you would the first day of class in an introduction to ceramics class.
Okay, sure. Well, ceramics is actually the process of firing. So the ceramic is when it's a hard state. But before that, it's a very malleable, flexible plastic material that we use to form pots and sculpture and other different objects. We use various different materials. So we have a stoneware, we have a terracotta, we have porcelain, and all those have a different region of the world that they come from or where they're specifically mined or cultivated.
And different like textures when they're raw and things like that,
Yes.
different colors.
Yeah, absolutely. So like for me, I use all different types of clay. I use high firing stonewares that fire to about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very hot.
Yeah.
And then we have stoneware, terracottas that we fire about mid-range. So you get these nice earthy reds. And then porcelains and other different materials in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to mix them, or is that not a thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So for me, my work, like I just finished making a clay body yesterday. And so I can experiment, I can do whatever I want with, if I want to add some grog, make it like a real earthy, kind of craggly clay material, I can add these materials to that. So yesterday I added some black oxides to it to get this real black, rich clay that I work with usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
What drew you to ceramics?
So when I started off in school, in my undergrad, I was a painter and drawing student. And I had to take an elective. I wasn't even interested in ceramics at that time, but went down there, had a great instructor, had to take it as an elective. Ted Neal was my instructor. And so I took that class and just kind of fell in love with it, able to mold the material and create whatever I wanted. And it was a very positive experience.
And still get to play with like shapes and lines and colors and things like that
a little
bit.
Absolutely.
What school was that?
That was Ball State in Muncie, Indiana.
And did you get your MFA there?
No, so I got my undergrad from Ball State, and then my master's degree was Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. Yeah.
And then what brought you to Texas?
So the job that I currently have at Brookhaven Community College, so I'm a tech, and then I'm also adjunct professor there as well.
Terrific. Mm-hmm. So we talked about a little bit about how you do kind of like to experiment with different ways of making clay or making the pottery. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about like your inspiration for your various or your kind of approach to it.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a pretty distinctive approach to what I do. And can I talk a little bit about where that started? Like
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So during graduate school, I was accepted into a residency program in Canberra, Australia, which is about 3 hours towards the center of Australia from Sydney. I was there for 3 months. And during that time, I was digging local clays. I was creating these sculptures where I dug in the ground and packed materials into the ground and excavated those and was displaying those. That was part of my residency program. And during that time, I got to see this ossuary at this gallery. And an ossuary is like a container for the dead or like bones or deceased. And that experience, just seeing these pulverized bones inside, just gave me this idea of, we're all once we're like dust to dust, like ashes to ashes, right? And so when I got back from the residency, I was thinking, how can I use like powdered materials to get what I want? And so I started experimenting with different clays as a pulverized material. So I would pulverize them in my studio, and then I would pack them into forms, and they came out like it was like this like epiphany moment of like these objects can actually be made in this form. And so traditionally with ceramics, we either wheel throw it, hand build it, or slip cast it. So it's always made using water with like a wet clay. Mm-hmm. It's never made in this form of like a powdered material. And so I started thinking about, I'm excavating the ground and doing these different kind of processes that aren't necessarily art related. And so how to make those connections with those two.
Right.
So using materials and like raw materials and thinking about how we mine, materials. So a lot of my work started off with these kind of godlike views to mine sites and reproducing those mine sites.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like by pulverizing them and working from this micro level, it's almost like you're a human 3D printer.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
That is.
And you haven't encountered this really much ever?
No,
No.
not really. I mean, I've seen some people do kind of like a dry glaze on the outside.
Yeah.
There's a lot of English potters that will take kaolin and they'll rub it on the outside and then they'll open it up and you get this really beautiful kind of cracking on the surface. But nothing where you're actually using this as a material, because that being said, in graduate school, I had so much failure. Like I learned so much from it, which is great. And I try to pass that on to my students as well, that failure is the best teacher. Absolutely. Hands down. If you're having success after success, your work is just going to be stagnant. I mean, there's no reason to get better.
That's what I tell beginning artists too.
Exactly. So it's in graduate school, like I had kiln after kiln after kiln, just rubble, because not all clays do what I needed to do.
Right.
So I have very specific clay bodies that I've kind of designed or engineered to hold together during high fire. Yeah.
I want to look at some images of some of the work, and then you can tell me about these specific pieces.
Yeah.
I think we've got 3 views of this piece.
Sure. So this piece in particular is based off of a basalt body. So basalt, the word basalt is more like a lava rock. The clay that I use is a very high manganese, high iron clay body. So you get these really beautiful jet black, smooth clay bodies. But that whole form was created making different little objects that I then put together using paper clay, glaze, slip, and then make it into a form that I then pack together and create the artwork that way.
So they were all fired at once, though? Or not?
Yeah, so everything was fired individually and then kind of assembled together as like one object.
Okay, very cool. Let's see what's next.
Oh yeah, similar. So this piece was in this year's NCECA annual exhibition, Form Will Find Its Way. And that piece was the same style. So putting it together as individual objects and reassembling them. And actually one part in there, I had to build this little mini kiln within a kiln.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
because it was huge. Like this piece is 43 inches long,
Yeah.
30 something inches wide, this mass weighing, like 300 and something pounds. And so I had to build something to contain all those parts, because the kiln, it might like crumble and like destroy this kiln. So in one of those parts in there, there's actually a brick stuck to the side that I really enjoyed, because it's this nice yellow brick that kind of high contrast. So in that piece, there's a part of that kiln that I built.
Because a kiln is like a brick structure
Yeah,
generally.
yeah. But the kilns that I fire in are electric.
Okay.
And so they're all soft brick. So they're very, they can be damaged easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you constructed one inside a sculpture.
Sure.
Very cool. I know this sculpture.
Oh, yes, you do. Very much so.
Yeah. So what's the story with color in your work?
So the color, so prior to being in Dallas, I was in New York City. And being in New York City is like, it's just so many people rushing to do the same thing.
Yeah.
We're all trying to survive. And so there's all this lights and just graffiti, and like one corner right by work, it was like this ongoing art installation. It was always changing. There was always like new pieces of paper that were like, spackled on the corners. So it was always changing. People would draw and do less graffiti. And so it was like this beautiful little spot that became my kind of, my little art exhibition as I go to work.
Oh, cool.
But there was like red brick comes through and paint and things. So when I was in New York, I didn't have a lot of space. Like I didn't have like a big studio. I shared it with like 15 other people. And so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to make a lot of work. So when I was on the subway, I would write, I would draw, and think about work. A lot of it's about thinking and, how to make work eventually. So for that time I was there, I made very little work. But when I got to Dallas, it's like all of a sudden I had all these kilns, I had all this space. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible, like how much
Yeah.
space we have here. And I have a studio at home and at work too, where I teach. And so I have a lot more opportunity. And so all the color, all the different materials that I've been adding to the work is all this like resonance that happened during the time in New York.
Okay.
So like that piece in particular has paint, it has glaze, it has slip, oxides, it has rubber on it, which is like this plasti dip, which is fantastic material. You get these very vibrant colors with it.
Feels like New York, that piece.
Yeah, definitely. When I look at that, I'm like, I know that spot.
Oh,
I know
how
that
cool.
spot.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
And it's like this big, roughly,
Yeah,
and weighs about, what would you guess?
I like 50 pounds.
Oh, that's
maybe,
it?
Maybe 60. I
Well,
don't
I'm a
know.
weakling. I don't know because
It's heavy. Like
it is a heavy
everything I
piece.
make is heavy.
Yeah,
I'm like, I got to
everything.
start working with like styrofoam or something.
Yeah. No, I mean it's good, but I guess that's because of the density of the clay, right?
Yes, yeah, very dense material. And that's something that I've enjoyed too, is that when you look at it, it looks like it has visual weight, right? But when you know that it like weighs like 70 pounds, like, oh my gosh, now it has physical weight too.
Yeah.
Which I think gives it a different perspective on the
Yeah,
object.
totally. Let's look at a couple more.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's look at a tree trunk.
Yeah, it
almost.
does, kind of like cutting. So similar object, using that basalt clay and forming that into a mold. The blue piece below that was another kind of combination of different forms together. And that piece, I think it was like glacial milk. And thinking about how, like our environment, I'm really interested in our environment and how things change due to our interaction. We think we're doing good things and we kind of put it to the wayside, but in actuality, a lot of our decision making comes out, not so good,
Yeah,
obviously,
that's-
right?
yeah.
So allowing the glaze to be more of a metaphor or another way of expressing what I'm thinking about, and not just be like a covered glaze. It's running, it's melting, it's craggly, and then you have these kind of like forks on the bottom, kind of holding this whole object up. So. Yeah, that's kind of what that piece
And
is about.
what about why the blue? I'm just curious.
Well, the blue, if you look at like these kind of glacial melts, you get these incredible blue
Oh,
pools.
yeah.
So you'll see like a glacier, and like in the middle, you'll get this like melted area where it's like this incredible blue color.
Yeah.
And so so that glaze took a long time to kind of design and figure out and get that nice blue color.
And
right?
super high temperature, right?
Yeah, so that glaze is an 04 glaze, which is like a little bit hotter than bisque, but I fire it quite a few cones hotter than that to cone 6, which is like 2290 or something. And so that glaze will just run and just melt, and it's really beautiful.
And I hear this term a lot, like the cone. What does cone stand for?
So cones are pyrometric cones,
Okay.
and that measures heat and time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so over time, like that's how we tell what's going on in the kiln. So we'll have these little cones that stick up, and they'll start bending, and then they'll curl over, and then they'll flatten.
Oh, wow.
And so as it does that, we know exactly what temperature the kiln is.
That's cool. So it's that's kind of manual. Watching.
Yeah,
that's
instead of doing
really
like a
neat.
digital pyrometer. And you can also tell temperature of a kiln just by color and sight too. So looking at it and saying, okay, it's a dull red, that's about 1500 degrees. And as it gets hotter, it'll start going orange to white to green to blue. And you know it's getting really hot then.
Wow, that's something. So it's not for it's dangerous.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. That's what makes it great.
Those are great.
Yeah, thank you. So this was from that series at Mine Site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so thinking about how it's those kind of bands that run around, like the little trucks will be on, getting all the
Yeah.
materials out. And so that's like a very shallow mine of an image I took, or not, I didn't take that, but I found it, of an image above.
It's interesting. So, in a sense, some of these are landscapes.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
Very cool. We'll look at a couple more, and then we'll talk about what's been going on lately.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, so this piece was fired about 7 times to get
Oh
that
my
thick
God.
crust on it. So that crust it's like a ½ inch thick. Like it's really thick.
Oh my
And
God.
so I'll put layers of glaze, slip, under glazes, and fire it. And then take it out and it's kind of cracked a little bit. And then I'll add more slip, more glaze, more color. And I'll start pipetting glaze or slip in between the cracks. And it's really beautiful. I have this image on Instagram of me dropping this black behind it, and it just ran and became like this vascular system through it.
Oh, cool.
It's really cool. And then fired it. So similar here too. But that's a black glaze. So I was thinking about, kind of iridescence of oil, where you get those beautiful colors in there, but it's black. It's like this black color. And so thinking about that, tar ball is what that one was, with the white porcelain. And I use a lot of porcelain too. And when people see it, they're like, there's no way it's porcelain.
Yeah, because it's
like
so...
this piece here, that's all porcelain. And that's with that blue glaze with that little acrylic box. And the woman who purchased this piece, she has it up on like this kind of like high rise in Dallas, like beautiful space. But she said when the light comes in, it like glows.
Wow.
And it's like this glowing little like acrylic box with this like really rough white piece kind of on top.
Oh, how cool.
It's really cool, yeah.
And then what's the difference between a slip and a glaze?
So a slip is just a liquefied clay body.
Okay.
And then a clay or glaze, is that what you asked, glaze?
Yeah.
So glaze, it's all about different ratios
okay.
of silica to alumina, which alumina is basically clay. And so if you have more silica, which is a glass former, you have a glaze. If you have more alumina, less silica, you have a clay body.
Gotcha.
So, but they all have to be present to, yeah.
Makes sense. So you're not really doing this in a vacuum.
No.
You were recently named Emerging Artist of the Year by Ceramics Magazine, Ceramics Monthly. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And then you represented the U.S. in the...
Korean International Ceramic Biennale.
Oh, I thought it was the I wasn't going to pronounce that.
So
first
yeah,
word.
Icheon is the World Ceramic Center where it was, which sounds like really prestigious.
It sure does.
I mean, it is.
But it is, right?
Yeah, it was really cool. I just got back from Korea. I've been back for a week now. I was really jet lagged.
I bet.
But it was a really great experience. It reminded me a lot of New York City. I spent a lot of time in Seoul,
great.
Which is just so beautiful. But they have all these green spaces for you to kind of go into and explore. And like this image here is really great, like all the power coming to one.
Yeah.
It's like this tree of energy, which is really cool.
I like this.
Yeah.
So is this just a shop, or is this the actual biennial?
That's just a shop. So just an area where a lot of ceramics is. I got the opportunity to meet with a potter there that does a traditional ongi style of ceramics. And so these are giant moon jars that would hold soju, which is like a rice wine, or they would hold kimchi.
Wow, cool. Some really great images.
Thank you.
So how many people would you say were at the Biennale?
Like artists
Like
represented?
artists, yeah.
Well, I don't know how many artists there. I think altogether there was 300 selected, and they had like there's different locations for it. So like, these are the kimchi jars too.
Oh, wow.
Very like antique. It's been around like 100 years old. But anyway, going back to that. So as for the different countries, there were 44 countries represented there.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And so from the United States, there were only probably 12, maybe more, ceramic artists representing the United States, which was really cool.
Did you find that like regionally there were like completely different styles, or?
Oh my gosh. Like my favorite artist that I saw was probably Anita Regal, and she's a UK artist. And I've always seen her, saw her work first when I was in graduate school, like this beautiful kind of cylindrical shaped object, but it kind of tapered and it had a lot of like crusty on the side, like beautiful glaze, like just what I like. And I always thought her work was small just because of the intimacy of the objects, now they're related to each other. But when I went there and saw this piece she had, I mean, it was huge. It was like, I don't know, it had to be at least 3 feet wide by 3 feet,
Wow.
which when I was thinking it was like 12 inches. And then coming there, I'm like blown away. It was like an incredible experience just to see her work.
Oh, that's cool.
Because she like adds all these weird little parts into her clay body and then puts this very vibrant glaze on the outside. But there was all sorts of really good stuff, like really highly crafted objects, and then very exploratory, experimental pieces too.
What do you think is, I think that, there was always that craft versus fine art thing. And I think clay is kind of elevated at this point to the point where people don't really think of it so much, like definitely as being craft, or,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is next for the movement?
Ooh, that's a good question. What's next for ceramics? Well, being in New York, I definitely saw a lot of clay being represented in big galleries.
Cool.
I mean, you just saw a lot of it, like this kind of resurgency since like Peter Volka's time, where he was just like running the show, like all that abstract expressionist ceramics. So I think we're in a really interesting time. A lot of people are doing a lot of work with like identity and where they come from, and incorporating more of like a personal understanding into the ceramic work too, which is really good to see that, where it's not just about like this high proficiency of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of more exploratory and venturing out a little bit.
Very cool. And what about you? What do you think is next for you?
Oh, gosh.
Do you have any projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I have a lot. So after I got back from the Korean Biennale, I was here for a day, and then I flew out to Vincennes University, where I have a show up right now. Got back, I finished writing an article for Ceramics Monthly about my experience working with Steinbeißer, which is like a group in Amsterdam,
Oh, wow.
who does these experimental gastronomy events, but have like artists make these crazy place settings or like really weird like utensils.
How cool.
Really cool event. And then writing an article for Voyage Dallas right now.
Awesome.
And then I have a show in Korea in March.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, congratulations on everything. Is there anything we missed?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan.